Okay, Jason, I would like to meet Jack. Jack's daughter is working in the Seattle, Washington area.
Jason.
Yeah. And Jason goes up to Seattle, around Seattle once a week for his company. I didn't remember what the name of your daughter's.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think it's 7 o'clock. So,
yes. You guys connect that to.
Welcome to the Desert Blockchain session for Wednesday, February the 28th, 2018. It's 7 p.m. Arizona time, and I love to hear myself talk. That's why John is playing words over and over. We can put it into a loop. It'll be wonderful. So anyway, if you're not familiar with, how many people are, this is your first time at a Desert Blockchain event? Wow,
Yay.
Lots.
Great.
Thank you for coming. So Desert Blockchain is designed to build community here in Arizona around the blockchain, decentralized web technologies, and so forth. And you being here tonight is part of that community building. So thank you so much for being here and just being here and listening, and your participation helps build the community. So I'm Jay Carpenter, and I'm the founder of Desert Blockchain, and Jason Horton is the co-organizer of Desert Blockchain. We've been going for about 3 years now. And basically, what we're intending to do tonight is we're going to be talking about use cases for blockchain. And specifically, we're going to be talking about, I'm going to give you a little summary of what happened on February the 3rd, which was our first Arizona Blockathon event, and some of the people in the room participated in that. But basically, we've done a lot of talking over the years about blockchain and what it can do and whatever. Well, the idea is, hey, let's build something. So now's the time to start building things. And as you'll hear tonight, this is also an opportunity to start to involve some of the local organizations and entities and give them an opportunity to participate and build some, have the developers and designers build some blockchain applications, at least prototype, at the prototype level, and get some of the organizations in Arizona involved in this. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about me. I have been in the blockchain space for about, I guess, going on 4 years now. Sort of, I heard the siren song of the blockchain, and it's been like almost every waking moment thinking about what's possible with this technology. And how I got into this is I've been into telecommunications for years and years. And the telecommunications industry worldwide has been grappling with some very fundamental issues regarding naming, addressing, numbering, and identity. And as soon as I saw the blockchain, I said, aha, this is a potential answer to what the telecommunications and media industry has been looking for years. So that was my interest, but certainly as I've learned more about the space, it's been like, wow, this is really, really fundamental. So we don't recommend any investments, any expenditures of money, none of that. This is really about broad applications for blockchain and decentralized web technology. So does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything you definitely want us to go over tonight before we get started? Yes.
One of the things we do in Anchorage, we've got a group called Code for Anchorage.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is creating various governmental applications that causing city and states to need less tax money.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an excellent kind of an approach for you guys.
Are you a plant?
Am I a plant?
Because our first
Maybe like a little house of horrors.
Our first presentation is on governance and blockchain. So you're actually talking about something that's a little bit different, but the interest in applying blockchain to public administration, I would call it, which I think is what you're talking about, is growing. And fortunately, we have some policymakers in Arizona that have vision in this space. And if Mark Goldstein was here, he would be able to tell you a little bit about a bill that was introduced to actually start to put some of the Corporation Commission functions and functionality in a blockchain application. And just to expand upon that a little bit, because I think this is really important, the government of Dubai and maybe the United Arab Emirates have committed like $200 million to put all their government functions on the blockchain by the year 2020. So the point that you bring up is awesome. And some of the use cases we should really be looking at in this realm is in public administration. So anyway, perfect point. And you'll see why in a few minutes. So any other comments or questions or whatever? So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch back over to this view so that everybody can, the folks that are watching this can see who's here. But let me start with an introductory presentation called Use Cases. So on February 3rd, in this room, we had the first ArizonaBlockathon.us event. And we had about, hide that bottom piece. So the intention of the Arizona Blockathon event was to, well, let's see, these are the topics I'm going to cover, first of all. The first event, the next event, a bounty program, and then we'll talk a little bit about feedback. The mission of these events is to build the developer and the designer community here in Arizona. As I mentioned, we've got these policymakers with vision in the blockchain space. So we have Jeff Winninger, who's in the Arizona House of Representatives, who successfully had the first digital signature on the blockchain as a valid legal signature. He was the champion of that particular bill. We have David Schweiker, who's the co-chair of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus. And we have also some other policymakers in Arizona. Paul Watkins of the Arizona Attorney General's office is helping to shape a fintech sandbox, which might include blockchain, which would give us some safe harbor and some reduced entry requirements in order to get into fintech as well as possibly blockchain. So we enjoy this incredible group of policymakers that have a vision for this blockchain and decentralized space. But the next step is to build the technical talent. And part of the Arizona Blockathon is to give us an opportunity to come together, build some things on kind of a very basic level, and then kind of learn from one another. And as you'll see later on, part of our opportunity set is to now incorporate sort of a collaboration with some of the organizations that are in Arizona. There's a big interest in putting Arizona at the lead of the blockchain innovation space. And part of what I just mentioned, we're out to create some prototypes and to create this collaboration where developers, designers, and organizations can come together and work together. And yes?
I might want to mention Sandra Day of Congress School of Law doing this as a dedicated
topic for this.
Right. So Corey's bringing up a great point. In addition to our interest as developers and so forth, there's also the Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law has a blockchain interest group, and they have a monthly session now. That's a lunch session with speakers. They had the last one was last week, and we had David Schweikert speak, Jeff Wenger, and Paul Watkins. And on March 21st, we have Jason Horton, who's going to be speaking about his project, which is called Nori, which is a carbon removal trading platform, which is really, really cool. So keep an eye out for that. The ASU student blockchain group meets like every Monday night and in a hall bigger than this. And those guys are on fire. Those folks are really, really on fire around blockchain. So keep an eye out for that as well. But we got some cool things happening.
Campus is that?
What's that?
Which campus is that?
It's at the ASU, the Tempe
Oh,
campus,
Tempe.
in the Laddie Coors building. So, the other part of this that we're going to talk about tonight is an opportunity to create some funding around some of these events and some of these projects and prototypes and so forth. So the first event was from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. here at the Innovation Center at Grand Canyon University. And I also want to thank Grand Canyon University for hosting us at this awesome facility. Works out really well. We had a little over 40 people that attended, and then we had about 23 developers that created 5 projects in the afternoon. And the projects were digital asset management chain, or DAM chain. And Julian, he was the captain of that team, and it's really, really awesome. It's the presentation is on the Meetup site. I highly recommend you take a look at that. Julian, by the way, if you don't know Julian, he is an amazing developer, and he's working on some really, really cool zero knowledge proofs, ZK snarks, and combining Monero and Zcash and some other constructs to make anonymous tokens, which could be extremely powerful. So, so then the next group had, digital asset management actually had working code, right? By the end of the day. And we're talking about basically a 3-hour afternoon period of, quote, hacking, which is amazing. You know, Ricky you were a team captain as well, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to a 3-day event down in Dallas that American Airlines is having for hacking on the blockchain and so forth. We're not talking 3 days, we're talking an afternoon. These people came together to produce this, which is remarkable. So the second project was voting on the blockchain, and that was actually had working code. And then we had a firearms safety project, which was a proposal basically, quite timely, and I think it inspired some people to take that idea and move forward with it, not necessarily in the project that was created here, but using some other constructs. And then we had fitness tracking using the blockchain, as well as and that didn't quite get to code, but we had a collaborative workspace using blockchain tracking or for tracking usage and so forth, and that actually got to code as well. So this was a photo of some of the presentations and projects and so forth. And this is DAM chain, which Julian was the team captain. I highly recommend you scroll through that. And one of Julian's presentations at the other blockchain meetup is somewhere on the site and so forth. And that's really, really cool. And that's featuring your project called Tunnel, TNNL. The videos are available on desertblockchain.com, and you can see all the presentations and so forth. So the next event is going to be Saturday, April 28th. In this room, same format. We'll have talks in the morning, 4 talks in the morning, 30 minutes each, and then break into teams and go to lunch and come back for an assignment. It's a very broad assignment, and the teams can create for like, Andrew, welcome. Andrew is also one of the participants. Anyway, so then the teams will get together, create their presentations and whatever prototype they can create, and then they come back and they present, and they basically vote among themselves as to what the top projects are. No judges, and we're going to be revising the voting process because it was really interesting the way the voting went. It highlighted to me the flaws of voting, frankly. So people couldn't remember who did what project and whatever, so they were just kind of voting blind. So it'll be up to 50 developers and designers, and it's by invitation. It's an event for people that know how to code or that are designers. And by designers, I mean somebody who's a web designer or is skilled in design thinking, but basically can add that human look, feel, and creative touch to the project. We're rolling out a bounty program. So I'll talk a little bit more about the bounty program in a moment. I invite you to invite developers and designers that you know to at least consider participating in this. And they can email me, and basically I look to see if they've got a GitHub account, what their skill level is, and so forth. And I also invite the Desert Blockchain community to invite companies and entities and organizations to post use cases. We're actually talking to some amazing companies that are interested in posting use cases for the next Arizona Blockathon for the teams to pick. Teams don't have to pick the use cases, but at least it could spark some collaboration between developers, designers, and actual entities that are in town. So let's see. Here's the bounty program. Let me talk about that a little bit. We don't have this fully mapped out yet, but basically it will allow entities to post a bounty as added incentive for the teams to adopt that particular project. And the idea is to expand the prototype development period over a 6-month period, like on a part-time basis. So what we've been doing is we've been meeting on Monday nights from 5:30 to 6, just as sort of an open session. And if you're a developer, you're welcome to join us. There's been some great exchange of information and technical talent and so forth. We'll continue that. But the idea is to use the Arizona Blockathon Day as a way for people to come together, get inspired about some particular ideas, do a little bit of coding, and then if they choose to do so, they can continue building the prototype over a 6-month period on a part-time basis. And teams are free to choose a bounty project, non-bounty project, or create their own. So we're going to hear a couple use cases presented tonight, and you'll kind of get a sense of how this can work. If somebody's interested in posting a use case or you want to participate in whatever, you can email me. That is the meetup, which is, I think we've got about 25 people that are already signed up for it. I haven't gone through to see the coding skill levels and so forth, but it is open. You can sign up right now. So we do have a sponsor, which is Canyon Angels, and These are the people that are involved in the actual entity that is producing this. It's got a funky name, and we go by ArizonaBlockathon.us. But it's myself, Elio Grieco, who's one of the key people in cybersecurity here locally, very active across the hall at the cyber warfare range. Elio will tell you every reason possible why blockchain is a bad idea. And he's sort of our counterpoint to all the enthusiasm that we get behind blockchain. Jason is an active developer in multiple projects, including Nori and CryptoPal, and very talented in the Ethereum blockchain development space. Tim Kelly is in charge of entrepreneurship here at GCU, and he is also in charge of Canyon Angels as well as Thunderbird, the Thunderbird School of Management, their angel group. Matt Oxendale is here, and Matt is an entrepreneur, and his family owns car dealerships in Northern California. So,
Arizona.
Excuse me. Do you want to expand to California?
No, I don't want anything to do with that state.
Arizona, excuse me. So that's who's behind the Arizona Blockathon.us. And I'll open it up for questions at this point. Yes.
The Arizona Angels that you mentioned, how's that connected in this setting?
Canyon Angels. So Canyon Angels is a angel funding group that looks at companies that are already kind of in revenue stages and can provide funding and so forth. But it's just basically a connection to seed funding, angel funding, and so forth. So it's not fully developed yet, but there could be a path for some funding via Canyon Angels. And I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't want to get people's hopes up too high, but the idea is to bring in funding avenues over time for the projects that we're going to be working on. So I've seen some amazing teams form out of these events, these one-day events, and people get excited, and they often will meet for a week or two, and then unfortunately the projects just sort of fizzle. So part of the idea here is to get some support, get some structure behind these awesome projects and awesome teams that come together, and see if we can take it to the next level. Does that make sense? Yes.
One way we've done that in Alaska is we are partnering up with a Calvin organization, which is linked with Techstars and Bradfeld and several other big names. And they've got something called a Startup Weekend. And so what we've done around the year, we've basically scheduled a come and think and network, followed by one of these hackathon type of things where you have a business idea you propose, and then you have some another weekend that's a development time. Any of the teams who want to continue working in the meantime do. And almost inevitably every year, one or two of the teams gets funded.
Well, that's what we're trying to spark here as well. This is a different approach. Now, if I understood you correctly, do the teams come and they've already got a project in mind?
No, they come and the first weekend is literally about brainstorming what kind of an idea any given individual would want to do, and then gathering the teams based on common interests and skill set.
Cool. That's the approach that I really like. Because in my mind, it's like setting up a stage for jazz musicians and just say, hey, create something. It's having that blank canvas where you're coming in with no preconceived notions, you don't know the other people. That can be very, very powerful.
We actually look at the Startup Weekend model, They're easy to find. They've got meetups in nearly every city in the world of any size. Really good model to follow.
Yes.
Some modifications too.
Well, I think they did that the weekend before startup week.
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah, it's last week downtown Phoenix.
Yeah.
They had a startup
The whole
weekend.
4 days or 5 days.
Well, there was startup week, but we're talking about
They
startup
had
weekend.
startup weekend, the
where
3
you-
days before the
Where
weekend.
you come in like on a Friday afternoon, you pitch ideas, form teams, sleep on the floor, and then stagger out on Sunday afternoon, hopefully with a
Yeah.
project.
And then they did their big
And then-
presentations on
And then
Friday.
startup week is like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, we just had it.
Yeah.
We just had it.
Cool.
So, I'm gonna bore you with a couple of stories about going from a clean slate. In the mid-1950s, the greatest jazz album ever recorded, Kind of Blue, with Miles Davis, was recorded in like 2 days. So Miles Davis basically collected these musicians that he knew their talent, and he gave them some very loose direction, and they recorded the greatest jazz album in history. And some of them were like one takes. So part of what we're trying to do here is give people the freedom to fail, the freedom to create, the freedom to express yourself to the max. The other example, there's a jazz pianist by the name of Keith Jarrett, and you can look this up. And there's something called the Cone Concert. A 17-year-old concert promoter invites Keith Jarrett to play at this concert, but they forgot the right piano. So this magnificent piano that he was supposed to play didn't show up. So he played on a broken piano. He wasn't going to play. And it's the best-selling solo jazz performance of all time. So I'm not sure we can totally create that kind of magic, but that's part of what I would like to experiment with and see if we can have that sort of freedom to create, freedom to fail, freedom to express yourself. So there was another question? Yes.
So who owns the IP, I guess, created it?
Everything's open source. So the idea is we need a little more legal counsel on this, but everything's MIT licensed so that it's not a proprietary construct. That's a great point. One of the things I'm most concerned about in the use cases is companies wanting to own the IP around this. And one of the things that I think part of the message here, and you as the community can help convey this message, is that this is a different construct. Blockchain is different. And yes, you can try to create patents around it and so forth, keep it proprietary, but everything that I'm seeing is that's going to kill your project. So part of the opportunity set is we have three things. We have the technology, we have the business models, and we have the policy. And part of our innovation opportunity is to innovate in all three of those areas, including the business models, including the policy. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the first use case, which is on blockchain governance. And we have Hawkeye Wilson, who has an extensive background in public policy, administration, and so forth. And you have come up with I think some really cool ideas for blockchain governance. So
Thank you, Jay.
Do you want to use this? Let me switch over to the other.
Well, what I was hoping to do is.
Okay, you can just tell me.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you.
So hang on just a second while I pull up your presentation.
Okay. Great. So I'm making a presentation on blockchain governance. From what I've seen, the adoption of blockchain as the transaction protocol on top of the internet will affect how our society organizes itself on an economic, political, and technological level. Oops, sorry.
Next one. Just tell me.
Yeah.
Change.
Okay, go ahead for the next one. Thank you. So blockchain governance as an incentive system for the decentralized coordination of a disparate group of people who do not know and or trust each other will basically result in an operating system for trustless trust. Next slide. Human agents are necessary because of the limitations of decentralized machine consensus, either at the protocol or smart contract level. This consensus is good at reducing transaction costs and resolving some organizational problems. So, human agents are also necessary because of the limitations of code. Code is good at defining and enforcing known knowns and known unknowns, but limited by unknown unknowns. An example of unknown unknowns would be like Bitcoin's block size and SegWit debate, and Ethereum's hard fork due to the DAO attack. Next slide. Flexible governance structures are those designed to align the interests of stakeholders while also flexible enough to withstand future shocks. Decentralized communication and information tools in blockchain governance needs to support transparency in the decision-making process while also enabling decentralized consensus without producing hidden gatekeepers. Next slide, please. So what is being developed is the 21st century model of governance, which is influenced by the open source software movement. The components of that, of course, are the software developers, miners, service companies, holders, or end users. Next slide, please. The model that we understand of government here in our country are these three branches, where you have the executive composed of nodes, the judiciary composed of miners, the legislator composed of developers and say the Senate, the community is the House of Representatives, and then you have the business and infrastructure. And then you will have the users and community, where some users will run nodes themselves and users will use businesses to interact with the network.
Could I interject something here?
Please.
I think this is an awesome slide and comparison and analogy that you made. Did you come up with this yourself, or was this inspired by something else?
I mean, this was, I did pull this model from someone else, but my background is at the federal level, and so I was able to identify easily with this.
Okay. There's a point I'd like to make here that's a fundamental tenet of our governance structure in the United States. And that is that there are checks and balances between the three branches of government. And I also assert that we govern ourselves on I'll call it an adversarial construct. We have two parties or more that are generally opposed. They have different worldviews, let's put it that way. And they're constantly sort of competing to put their worldview at the forefront. And I think that's a key construct to keep in mind, because that construct is even greater in the blockchain space. It's completely adversarial, and it works. And the difference between an adversarial trust model and a sort of trusted club or perimeter model is key. Because when we go to a bank or when we go to, you know, insurance companies and so forth, and I'm not saying anything against those constructs, but we are trusting them to sort of be the perimeter fence around whatever our interests are. An adversarial model is different. And I would rather trust my family's safety to an adversarial foundation rather than a trusted club. So, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, thank you.
Question.
In human history, the battle's always been about centralization versus decentralization. This finally encodes decentralization, and our founding fathers in this country did a really good job with that, and our present federal government is a perversion thereof.
So, yeah, in fact, and to just build off of what you're saying, one of the things that really draws me to blockchain is kind of what's going on. I mean, in our history, we have always been decentralized. As Americans, we want to live our lives without interference of others. And some have referred it to the Tocquevillian society. And so if you really wanted to understand what's going on with the wave of technology, refer back to like maybe 1810, around Tocqueville's time. So, and one more thing I want to say before we move on to the next slide is that any entity, individual or party can submit information to the blockchain, so it's necessary for the distributed operators of the blockchain to evaluate and agree before they are permanently incorporated into the blockchain. Since the author's trustworthiness is unknown, it is vital that all new information must be reviewed and confirmed before being accepted. This review results in consensus.
Yep. And consensus is a key area for innovation. So for all the blockchain constructs, in my view, that are out there are prototypes. And you know, what Hawkeye's bringing up is not only the governance, but also the consensus models, I think are really the next wave of innovation. And that's an opportunity set for us to look at. So I think what you're bringing up are dead on regarding areas that need to be innovated. And the other point that I'd like to make is some of the blockchains and other constructs that are out there right now are not really decentralized. They're actually centralized to some degree, and that's sort of given them a little bit of a, let's say, an advantage to scaling in a way that was sort of like fudging on the decentralization factor. So that's my 2 cents. Next slide.
Yes, please. So we have, you know, there basically 4 main models of finding consensus in a blockchain. You have the practical Byzantine fault tolerance algorithm, proof of work algorithm, proof of stake algorithm, and the delegated proof of stake algorithm. Next slide. Obviously, practical Byzantine would be like Hyperledger, Stellar, Ripple, proof of work, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin. Next slide, please. Yeah, proof of stake, Decred, Peercoin, and then delegated proof of stake, Neo, EOS, BitShares, Lisk. Next one. So then you move on to the informal models of governance, where the first is the decision function, which sees that governance as a function in the wishes of various legitimate stakeholders, such as the senators, the president, property owners, shareholders, voters, etc., and the output is the decision. This is useful in approximation, but can become inoperable if people break the law and get away with it, rules are ambiguous, or a revolution breaks out. Next slide. You also have the coordination model, which is seen as governance existing in layers. The bottom layer is an individual's ability to run whatever software they want if their role is as a user, miner, stakeholder, validator, etc. This layer is always the ultimate deciding layer, and its governing power cannot be stopped, but its actions influenced by the layers above it. For example, if all Bitcoin users decide to edit their client source code and replace the entire code with an Ethereum client that listens to balances of a particular ERC20 token contract, then that ERC20 token is Bitcoin. The second layer is composed of coordination institutions, and their purpose is to create focal points around how and when individuals should act to achieve a desired result. For example, a mechanism informing people if a hard fork is happening. Next slide, please.
Before we move on, Hawkeye.
Yes.
I think it's important to take a look at this matrix, because if I'm not mistaken, this is also the prisoner's dilemma, correct? Which is the core of Byzantine fault tolerance. Jason, you want to say anything about the prisoner's dilemma?
No, it's definitely that though. It's the core belief that the reason, as long as you have opaque operations, people are have a higher tendency to operate against each other. Whereas if there's transparency and people can see that the incentives are better or the same with operating with each other, then the tendency is that they operate with each other.
Yeah, which highlights the transparency and the open source nature of what we were talking about. And to get back to my point about the adversarial versus the trusted club, the trusted club usually involves some sort of obscurity and some sort of perimeter protection. But once that perimeter is pierced, then all bets are off. So, anybody? Yes.
Yeah, in fact, your earlier comment about intellectual property goes directly to that point.
Yep.
And I had a question. The tangle and hash that falls into the ones that you mentioned.
I'm sorry.
I think it's neither.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I think there's
I think tangle is just that, tangled. And I think that Hashgraph, from what I know about it, looks like it kind of suffers from some of the same things, gossip on gossip.
They have their issues, but blockchain has its issues too.
Yeah, and to further highlight the intellectual property, Hashgraph has patent protection, which is a big friction point for people to even look at it.
It is. I think Cardano is using some variation there, and there are others as well.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry.
Oh,
Next
thank you. Next slide, please. So now it's on-chain coin holder voting as a multi-purpose decision mechanism is employed by many in the space. Votes by coin holders are sometimes used to decide who operates the supernodes that run on a network. For instance, delegated proof of stake, you'd have EOS, NEO, LISC, and then votes by coin holders on protocol parameters would be like Ethereum's gas limit, and then sometimes even votes to directly implement wholesale protocol upgrades like Tezos. Next slide, please. Criticisms of this is that it results in low voter participation, wealth inequality distribution, that there's non-representativeness, that interests can collide, such as hodlers versus crypto kitties. And then, of course, centralization, where you have minors following the direction by the community, which is gauged via social consensus, aids similar to those that drive hard forks, like core developer support or Reddit upvotes. A majority-based consensus system needs to adequately protect and provide for minority interests, especially in a system where voting influence is weighted in proportion to the number of tokens held. Next slide, please.
Before you move on, Hawkeye brought a book tonight that I would like to bring to everybody's attention. It's called Skin in the Game by Nassim Taleb. And whoops, just blew the projector by electrostatic shock. Anyway, I think this just came out, but if Nassim Taleb wrote a paper or a post on Skin in the Game. Mm-hmm. And if you're not familiar with this, it's really, really awesome. Looking at how having skin in the game, which if you're a miner in the Bitcoin blockchain, you've got skin in the game. You're expending electricity for reaching consensus. And this voting graph that you're talking about, I think starts to highlight some of the flaws around voting to reach consensus. So I just wanted to bring this point out before we move on. And this is an ancient concept, and the example that's brought up in this skin in the game is that apparently the ancient Romans or Greeks or whatever would require the architect of the bridge to sleep under the bridge. That's called skin in the game.
That's a good idea.
So,
I was gonna say the operative word incentive, because I keep hearing that,
right.
Randy, about when they're talking about consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all about incentive. Miners are not doing it because it's fun.
Right.
Because they just like to.
Right.
So that's why proof of stake is the other side of the coin, where more people can participate.
Well, maybe, but there's another construct that I'd like to bring up at this point, which I shared with Ricky regarding a particular application use case that he's working on. It's called prediction markets. And there's a economist out of George Mason University by the name of Robin Hanson. And he talks about voting, and I'm going to spoof this up, but I'll give it a shot anyway. It's sort of like people vote their beliefs, but they put their hard dollars on what they really think is going to happen. And that's the whole foundation around prediction markets, is if you've got your dollars as skin in the game, you will project differently than if you don't have skin in the game. And that's one of the dimensions around voting. Yes.
A political metaphor would seem to me republic versus democracy versus meritocracy.
I think that's a good
And
point.
how in a meritocracy do you decide the merits?
Yep, good point. Sorry,
No, this is
interrupted.
great. As you probably saw a couple weeks ago, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission Chairman, Chris Giancarlo, testified and introduced a new acronym, DYOR, do your own research. And I was just going to let you know that there's organizations out there like coincenter.org, blockchainhub.net, obviously the Congressional Blockchain Caucus.com that are dedicated to this concept of governance. And I put up a picture of Jared Polis, Democrat from Colorado, and David Schweikart, Republican from Arizona, just as an example that, this is obviously bipartisan and regardless of party. Next slide, please. I've been, speaking to Jay, and he suggested that this this governance presentation in some form could serve as a use case for the next blockathon in 2 months. And did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just already made the point that we're really looking at three things dancing together for these things to work, which is the technology, the code, the business models, and the policy. And I think what you're bringing up tonight, Hawkeye, is the governance and the policy, maybe the business models a little bit, but the governance, reaching consensus, new ways to do that, I think could be really, really awesome projects and a use case that we might be able to experiment with. And, if we could make some progress in that realm, it would make a huge, huge difference in this whole construct, decentralized construct. So any other, did you have any more?
No, well, just one more slide.
Okay.
All right, so like organisms, the ability of a blockchain to succeed over time is based on its ability to evolve. This evolution will bring about many decisions on direction, and is the governance around those decisions which most strongly determine the outcome of the system. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, comments about all that? I'd just like to highlight something that, in this governance area and the decentralization and the whole conversation that we're all part of, is we are shifting to a new level of human connectivity and relatedness. So the notion that we are sitting here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are in this sort of like insulated cocoon, that we're somehow disconnected from people that live on the other side of the world, is rapidly disappearing. And if you take 10 steps in that direction over to the cyber warfare range, they will share with you examples of our new level of connectedness. Pretty much anybody, anywhere in the world, if they knew what they were doing, could be listening in on this device, almost at any time. So part of what we're talking about, and thank you for preparing that, Hawkeye, I think part of what we're dealing with and part of what we're talking about in this governance, in the consensus, in the blockchain space, is a sort of the next generation of human relatedness, human connectivity. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. John Paul, I don't think you're here, are you?
Oh, where is that guy?
Where is that guy? So John Paul was the other person who submitted a presentation, and I won't be able to do it justice, but I will highlight it, and it is linked in the meetup. But for those of you that don't know John Paul, he's moved here from Southern California, like in the last year or so. I don't know why, but he left Venice Beach, which is one of my favorite places to go. My kids used to watch a cartoon show called Rugrats. And I'm pretty sure that was based on life in Venice Beach. And I was always so envious. I thought, oh my God, I had my childhood to do over again. I want to be in Venice. So anyway, John Paul runs the Ethereum meetup, which meets down in the Chandler area. And he's also interested in, is it EOS? So he's written this blog post that's gotten some really good reviews, but I think he's got several use cases that he's interested in pursuing, and one is a ride-sharing application for drivers, riders, developers, and so forth. So I'm just going to highlight that, and you can read about it. It's my fault that I didn't get in contact with John Paul earlier and get him confirmed for tonight. So I apologize for that. Any questions about that? Yes.
I just heard about this today. So if I understand it, EOS and Cardano are really Ethereum improved?
I think it's Ethereum centralized. I mean, that's my rough take. I'm not a, I follow three things. I follow Bitcoin, Ethereum, and interplanetary file system. And 90% of my time, other than learning to code and blah, 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 is IPFS, the interplanetary file system. So I could be totally wrong about EOS, but I think there's some centralized constructs in there that.
I spent a lot of time studying EOS and listening to Dan Larimer, the developer. So I wouldn't say I'm a technical expert in it, but as far as my understanding, I'm very excited about EOS, and is because Larimer first and foremost is an anarcho-capitalist background, so he's trying to get rid of centralization. And the other benefits of EOS is, and I was just telling these guys about it the other day. The guy Larimer has already created 2 blockchain platforms that are successful: Steemit, which you can see up there, and BitShares, which is relatively successful. So my understanding is that EOS is a platform that's being designed based on this guy's experience with 2 other platforms where he learned some things about governance specifically, and other elements of blockchains that, it's difficult to in life to take the things that you learn and retrofit them into your especially on a blockchain. It's hard to make changes to a blockchain application. So my understanding of EOS is that he takes the lessons that he learned, especially around governance, and the ability to use the votes of the community to drive innovation on the platform. So he took what he learned from sort of limitations in Steemit and BitShares and are applying those to EOS to create. And I would be surprised if it's centralized, because the guy himself is extremely aligned with the way I like to think of things, which is decentralization to the max.
Cool.
So I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if anyone else has studied EOS or not, but
yeah,
that's my view.
And one of the things that's important in this space, you should always be asking or asking yourself, what skin in the game does the person that's talking have? And I'm not saying you do, but I have no cryptocurrency, so I have no skin in the game in any of these. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, yes. And could you introduce yourself? Because I think it's important for people to know who you are.
My name is Wei. I'm a CTO working for Sweetbridge. Right now is a blockchain startup, revolutionize the supply chain using blockchain technology. I just want to share a couple points, and then because I've been in this domain, actually working with the technologists and also business side, every day is a great challenge for me, right? So one thing I want to demystify is this centralization and decentralization, because we kind of heard about 2 terms, right? And we start to kind of grow emotion to that, right? But we have to be careful about which context we're talking about, because the context helps us to make the sound decision and the reasoning. It's not like one gonna fits for all, right? We have to say that in what problem we're solving and using the centralization way to do it that makes sense, or for others, actually decentralize the consensus model makes sense, right? And what opportunities we have. So I would recommend there's a paper, actually a blog, Ethereum founder called Vitalik. He actually wrote a very details, what he thinks Ethereum centralization and decentralization at which decision points, right? So we need to be kind of help all of us, the community, understand that when we see those people have opinions, right? And let's ask ourselves, where did he come to that conclusion, right? What is the context that help us to validate that? So that kind of due diligence, I would encourage everyone start with the history, right? Why the Satoshi come up with this very innovative across the whole nation? So another point here is really this governance, right? So governance, I love that topic because we need that, because policy is such an important aspect in this blockchain domain. But we have to not only study today, right? Study today, that means we live in the United States. The United States has this model, right? But let's imagine ourselves, because Satoshi, when he created the protocol, he did not create a protocol only for his country. He created a protocol that is across the border. So that is another interesting aspect. It comes to the primitives, right? It comes to the primitives to say that, oh, every human gonna have something called skin of the games, right? The incentives that can drive the people to collaborate. So that's something interesting. That means when we innovate, no matter in technology, no matter in business model, no matter in policy, let's ask ourselves is what are the beautiful wall we want to create? And start with the end picture, right? And then figure out that, oh, this technology has these characteristics, and I can apply that in the right way, right? And then maybe central, if a government really do their functionality, right? They say that I represent governments, I provide value to the whole community. We love to pay your tax. But if you did not do a good job, have no transparency, and get things done in a very slow way, guaranteed the human will have different kinds of the votes, right? So that's kind of my opinion here, is to help us to kind of enlarge our vision a little bit bigger, right? But also understand the characteristics this blockchain movements trying to bring all of us to see what potentials we can do. Right? That's kind of my
that's an awesome point. And my skin in the game is I want to be right. So,
What's the name of that block?
but what's that?
What's the name of the block she referenced?
Oh, I can send you.
If you could post that on the meetup,
Yeah, I will post that, yeah.
I'd appreciate it. But I might have implied earlier that decentralized is good and centralized is bad. That's not the case. They're neither good nor bad. They're just different approaches. And I think the point you're bringing up is awesome, that we are really in a new realm of experimentation and innovation to see what the combinations can be and how we combine centralized with decentralized.
Jay,
And yes.
I think that some people actually get away from that saying decentralized. They say distributed,
Yes.
because this is all about distributed networking. I think it's an actual third structural model, right?
That's correct.
Centralized, decentralized, then you have distributed.
Yep.
But we should be saying more distributed, not, because
Absolutely.
decentralized implies negative things, and distributed sounds better to me. Anyhow, we can have more nodes, you can have more sort of
Yeah, but that's, you're
participation.
conflating terms.
Right.
Those don't mean the same thing. I don't think you want to use distributed.
Yeah, distributed.
You can have a blockchain running on a
Networking.
single machine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like Napster downloading stuff and the whole.
They
That's distributed, right?
yeah, it's-
not
it's-
decentralized.
Yeah, but I can run a blockchain on a single machine with peers all running on that same machine, and it's not distributed.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's not really the term.
But the end sort of desired result of a blockchain like Bitcoin is to be as distributed as possible.
Would you say that's fair?
Yeah,
For
when
Bitcoin?
we talk about this specific type of blockchain, sure.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, and I think this is a great point, that trying to put any of these constructs, network architectural constructs, in a good or bad category is actually a mistake.
Yeah, because
it's just, it would be like saying a hammer is better than a screwdriver. You know, it's a hammer and it's a screwdriver. Sometimes we need centralized, sometimes we need decentralized, sometimes we need distributed. And the cool thing is we have all those tools to play with and to create with. And what you're bringing up, Hawkeye, is a slightly different dimension than just playing with the code. We can also play with the governance. So, yes.
I'd like to go back to the political metaphor, and I agree with you, by the way. Centralized is more efficient. Centralized kind of goes along with the political metaphor of a benevolent dictator. The problem is with benevolent dictatorship, typically it becomes hereditary, and then the second or third generation gets too used to the privilege. EOS, going back to the point that brought this up, the centralized is prone to breakage of the entire system if that part breaks, like the benevolent dictator's kids going bad, okay? The decentralization tends to be less efficient. Distributed nature tends to be less efficient, but it also tends to be more reliable if it works. EOS, I believe, stands for Enhanced Operating System, and it's much more scalable, much faster than Ethereum. They've taken into account a lot of concepts along the lines of security and user accounts and so forth that still has to be built on Ethereum. They kind of compare like DOS versus Unix in terms of an older metaphor. And the slide that you used, the title, I believe that concept could give a lift to an Uber.
Cool. Very cool. And I think there are a lot of people that are working on decentralized or distributed or blockchain ride sharing and other sharing services. So, yes.
I'm not sure if we're having the right discussion about centralized versus decentralized. One of the things that I was hoping for in Hawkeye's discussion was our centralized government is actually a bureaucracy, because bureaucracies are very efficient ways of managing complex information. I was looking forward to blockchain's power in handling complex information and distributing it as a way to re-examine whether we need a bureaucracy to actually manage all this information. I think there's a generation beyond us, which is going to be very interesting because of the availability and the possibility of control of the information, allowing us to re-examine some of the age-old assumptions, whether it's the Romans or the Chinese or us, that you need a bureaucracy to manage information centrally.
Yep.
What I didn't hear in Hawkeye's governance model was a way to use blockchain to actually confront that question, to actually have the blockchain be able to manage the information in a way that doesn't require all of the bureaucracy that we need today to manage the federal record, for example, or these kinds of things. That's what I'm missing in that part of the discussion. So it isn't central versus decentral. It's how you actually do it with a new way of managing information, with the new power of the distributed ledger. And I'm not hearing that, I'd love to hear more about it. And Hawkeye, if I could criticize slightly, I'd like your slides to maybe examine that a little bit more carefully.
And with your permission, I'd be happy to prepare another presentation.
Sure, that'd be awesome. Cool. Okay, great points. And I think what you're highlighting is this sandbox that we're playing in. We've got the opportunity to experiment with that. And I'm not an Ethereum expert, but I think that's what you're touching upon is part of the attraction of Ethereum is these sort of autonomous contracts, smart contracts. So.
I could share a little bit.
Yes.
So, I think the direction you're looking for, I like that. Why? Because the blockchain inspired us to go back to the word called value, right? That means today we're using money, right? Assets, right? That's easy. So the first use case is the payment application. I can pay you by cash without using blockchain, without going to the bank, right? Or cross-border. So, but a lot of the blockchain innovations start to think, say, what are other possible things called value, right? So, and then information is value, right? That means today, like the use case you mentioned about is there's a certain sensitive things. We have to use this third party, right, to help us to organize that, right, and making sure there's no hacker hack on that, right? So, but this blockchain allows us to say, instead of having one central party to fulfill that kind of services for us, is there any kind of a distributed, decentralized way we can kind of instead of one paper, right, like piece them out into the puzzles, then it can store all on the internet, anywhere. But there's a way called encryption, right? I can decrypt and encrypt, and that information has ownership, right? There's a lot of the innovations around identity on blockchain, right? Who about me? Today we share a lot of the about me on all sorts of internets, right? Applications, right? Including our governments have our system records. Okay, so a new innovative way to think about the identity, start to ask the question is, what information belongs to who, right? So people start to dream about it. Maybe that information, I should own that as an individual because that's the ultimate thing about me, right? And then instead of I have to share with, there's a company who very on the very bottom say, please sign up this data policy, and then they kind of use our data for their purpose, right? So what I wanted to let you know is information. Besides information, there's a lot of potentials we today call something is useful, is valuable, can be rethink on new kinds of the wiring using blockchain upon the internet as the next wave of the future. So that is a lot of the innovation happen at a global scale. If anyone interested in that, there's tons of ICO preview, right? Those are innovations hub. You can imagine that when people start to think about what are the possible ways to solve this problem, and whether those prototypes get into the next phase or not, the most important thing is we start to imagine and we start to execute. Until we can have that courage to imagine and then try something out. And I love the movements about, let's get together, try something out, right? Inspire each other. Maybe there's another dots can be connected.
Yeah, and part of the prototype idea and the teams and so forth of the Arizona Blockathon is to actually put something in real people's hands. Because we think we know what they're going to do with it until you actually get the prototype into somebody's hands. And they didn't read our minds and they didn't read the code. They really don't know what it is until they start to play with it. So I'm going to cut off the questions at this point because we have another use case to be presented. But I would like to emphasize that our sessions start at, we open the doors at 6 o'clock for an hour of networking and pizza and whatever. And afterwards, at 8:30 when we end, we go next door to Canyon 49. So all the conversation that's happening tonight, I think is awesome. And, you know, the before and the after are great ways to continue the conversation here. So, Andrew, would you like to come up front? Yes, please. So I met Dr. Andrew Weinberg at Startup Week. Thank you for coming tonight. So I met Andrew at Startup Week, and I started explaining this use case thing to him, and he started explaining the project that he's passionate about. So I invited him to come tonight and basically, you know, present your use case, and so go for it.
Do pretty quickly. So I'm a physician, like gastroenterologist, and I had a mechanical engineering background before that, and I've always been interested in trying to make things better, like many people do. Two problems with one solution I'm trying to work on. Right now, it's an idea for a platform. It's a cloud-based platform. The first problem is it has to do with patient scheduling. When they want to find the right physician, the right appointment time, location, insurance, all those variables that go into it. In the old days, we would call the doctor's office. Some of us still do that, and you wait on hold. But more recently, the last few years, people try and go onto maybe a physician's website or a group's website, and they dabble there, and they can make the appointment. But then if that's not what they're looking for, they have to figure out if the other doctors that they've heard about are in what group are they in, where are they at, are they in network for this particular year, because it changes so quickly. And there's really no centralized version for that. There's some competitors that have tried to allow you to make appointments online, but they don't have all the doctors. They don't even have the majority of the doctors. And so when that happens, when they say you're looking out for who can help me, let's say it's a simple problem, camp physicals for the kids, and you want to do it on a Tuesday afternoon. You want to know who's in network nearby and make it easy so that you don't have to take so much time off of work, let's say. You're not going to be able to cast your net wide because you're going to go to the largest site might have 15% of the doctors on there in any area. The idea is to make a platform that'll encompass hopefully all the doctors that way, that they can use so that the patients can, one, find the right doctor, the right time for themselves in network, or sometimes maybe even out of network. If they're looking for someone that does the most of a certain rare procedure, you might want to know all the doctors out there and make your own decision whether you want to make that appointment or not. And that's only one of the problems that I'm trying to solve. The other part of the problem is at physician offices, getting access to the doctor. There are two things that happens, right? Sometimes you go to the doctor and you have a 2 o'clock appointment and you're not seeing him till 3:30 and you're wondering why. And it's oftentimes because the doctors double book. They double book because patients don't show up or they cancel that morning. And so they have to accommodate and compensate for that. They have 20 patients on the schedule and they know 3 or 4 are not going to show up that day. They book 23 or 24 patients and occasionally they all show up and it's a disaster. So I want to try and minimize that need for the doctors, help maximize their schedules because of all their overhead, but also make it easier for the patients to get in there and not have that experience. So what the platform is going to do is going to be mobile based. So you take out your cell phone. You'd already have, input your information like insurance and your demographics into there. So you're just going to log into your app. You're going to type in what you're looking for. Let's say you got a skin rash the other day and you don't normally go to a dermatologist, but boy, you want to find one quickly because it bothers you. You put it in there. It's my symptom. They'll GPS to your phone. Or you can type in the address if you're at work, but you actually want to see the doc at home and it's not nearby. And it's going to tell you, you're going to put in, say, I want to see somebody from 2 to 4 o'clock. I don't know, it could be a Monday or a Wednesday. Those are the days that are good for you. And it's going to show you within X miles that you specify who's available at that instant. And even better, if nobody's available then, you'll take that appointment the following week because you still got to get the appointment. But you want to know if there's a cancellation or not. So all the people, all the doctors, when they get those empty appointments I was telling you about, it's going to two-way interface with the scheduling portion of their EMRs. And it's going to text you when that open appointment becomes available. And just like something like a Ticketmaster, it's going to say you have 10 minutes to confirm that appointment that you selected if you want it. or it goes to the next person that put up that same search criteria. So that's how it's going to help fill those slots for the doctors, minimize the chance for them to, minimize the need for them to do those double books, which will make them on time, in theory, much more so, and allow the patients to get to who they need to see, when they need to see it, much more easily than they've ever had before. That's the goal. Looking for a team to help me with that.
How many people are in the healthcare realm right now?
That's great.
Look at all these people.
Good, got a lot.
So
what do you folks see as, from a patient perspective? I guess there are three things I want to say this. Why would people sign up for this? So there's three components. There's the patient, the doctors, and the health insurance folks. For the patients, we explain, hey, it helps them find who they want to see, when they want to see it. For the doctors, it helps maximize their schedule. And for the insurance companies, it helps the patients stay in network more easily. Because patients are incentivized to stay in network, quite frankly, it's always cheaper for them. And if the doctors can, if the insurance companies can help provide that information to make it easier for a platform like this to do it, they're incentivized because they want to be able to save costs and make it easier for their patients to stay within their preferred networks. What do you folks see as challenges for something like that? Anybody? Just go ahead, back there. Very back.
Rick.
Rick?
Definitely very useful. I think one of the first challenges we would face is that how do you make this wide enough so that wide acceptance, so that the bigger it is, the more useful it is. But
So that's a good question. To launch something like this, you have to have what I call high penetrance in a very small area. You open up your app, you want to launch it in a small area like Phoenix or Scottsdale, zip code by zip code. You want to have all the doctors there and as many patients as you can. So the first time you open your phone, you've got lots of choices. If you open your phone twice and try and select something and the nearest doctor is 2 hours away, it's useless. You'll never use it. So the secret of success adapting it is to have high penetrance before you launch it. And I would try and make it free on the patient side as well as on the doctor side for a while, because that's the way to get people to sign up for it. Acceptance is a difficult thing. It'll be sort of like an open table for doctors, but have more things.
But it also seems
yes.
like there's a multitude of scheduling devices out there. You have to
different EMRs, but there is a standard for connecting. HL7 is a standard to connect so that they can communicate. So that is a challenge. So what I would most likely do is try and approach the larger vendors in the given area that I launch it in and start from them. Say, okay, you have 1,000 users or 1,000 physicians. We'd like to be able to connect this up and then move on from there. It'd be difficult to start with the smallest practices, but that's eventually, obviously, we want as many people to get that. Back there, please.
Yes.
Yes.
It is a challenge in changing the mindset of the doctors, because whenever I call a doctor, it's like, if you're an existing patient, it's fine to get in, but if you're not, it may be a month or two wait before you can get in. So I think it's changing their mindset.
So for the doctors, the advantage, if you're a doctor that's been out in practice a long time, you have this great big wait list and you feel great because you've been getting all your patients, this somewhat equalizes just as confident a doctor that might be new to the area that has a lot of openings, because those patients that had to wait 6 weeks now have the choice of waiting 1 week for the same service, and they can still read about the reviews and things like that to make their own decisions that way. The cost of a doctor not signing up for this, if he's an older doc that kind of wants to wait it out, is that he's going to start losing those patients if he's not one of those people to replace his own empty slots there. So I think it's an opportunity cost either way.
If your insurance network is already using this platform along with the doctors, then new patients, you just onboard them that way, right?
Yeah. So
as soon as, it can all be done on a platform via the app. They schedule with the doctor, and then the
two-way
insurance provider
communications.
sends the proper documentation up to the doctors. They can bill, and then they're good to go.
It would design to be two-way communication. So if somebody in the office said they just finished an appointment and they want to book something, the app will then recognize that slot disappears. Same token, if somebody on the app changes their mind a few days ahead and changes their appointment, it pops open in the doctor's office. So you won't have to rely on somebody calling up and and you get a confirmation number to make sure it's there.
So I'm going to hog the last two questions. Okay, because it's my meetup. So Andrew, it is central. So Andrew, what is it that sparked your passion about this? Sure. What did you see as a physician that's, I mean, I can tell you're passionate about this, and why is that?
So, well, for many reasons. One is every day that I practice, I see the side of when patients are trying to get in and then somebody doesn't show up, and I think the other day someone has to wait 3 weeks because I don't have a lot of clinic time. I'm doing procedures as well. And so I feel badly about that for the access standpoint. The second thing is even personal experience from, say, my wife's side. My wife needed to see a doctor early January, different condition, had looked it up. Who takes this new insurance? Because my employer changed their insurance plan, and it became very difficult to figure it out, even as a physician. You're calling up the office manager of a practice, and you realize that they don't really know if they're on that plan or not, as of January 1. And it's somewhat of a broken system that's ready for improvements. And I just feel if somebody's got to get out there and do it, it will get done eventually. I'm trying to make my effort to make it happen sooner.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced the siloed nature of the information and the communications and the coordination in the healthcare realm. And I truly think that we do have an opportunity with this blockchain construct and so forth to usher in some significant improvements. So the last question is, how can this community support you? What do you need? What do you want? What does the project need?
The whole platform still has to be HIPAA compliant. I need programmers to help make that connection between the platform that I'm building and specific large scheduling block EMRs that are out there. So not the whole EMR, just the scheduling portion. So it's an HL7 connection, I'm understanding. I need people that understand that or can get involved in that. I also need visionaries to help me with implementation, eventually marketing. But I'm trying to do this all local here, and this will be a great starting area for it.
What's your revenue model?
Revenue model would be free initially, both sides, then probably physician subscriber based. Once physicians see the value of replacing those things, they're the ones that are likely to be happy to pay for it relative to the consumers. I always want to make it free for consumers.
And we had a show of hands, which wasn't on the video, but I would say 25% of the people in this room have some sort of involvement in healthcare, right? So would you be, I mean, you're an expert as a doctor, as a physician, and you know the inside of the system. Would you be open to chatting with them and seeing if you could support whatever projects?
Definitely. It's a great group of people, and it's early on in my quest for this. I was one of the people at the startup week the other week, but that's what I'm looking for, is people that are interested in solving problems, and this is a local problem.
So how do people contact you if they're interested?
Good question. I'm going to give an email address. It's A Weinberg, WEINBERG, .openmedical@gmail.com.
I'm probably demonstrating my ignorance here, and I'm definitely not an expert. Now, maybe I missed something. But what about blockchain makes this more useful than a standard?
Well, Andrew's big attraction to blockchain is me inviting him to come here tonight. I just threw it out there, and he was generous enough to come and share his vision.
I know it still has to be a secure network from a HIPAA standpoint. Could blockchain technology be implemented to make that happen? Maybe. I'm not an expert in blockchain, but it has to be. It can't be an open source. You can't just have a platform out there that says John Brown's coming in for chest pain today or something like that. It's all private information. So that's what I know. So I don't know to answer in more detail.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Catherine, we're going to cut it off at this point because we've only got 2 minutes left in the time.
Thank you.
Andrew, thank you
very much.
Keep in mind, you can also contact Andrew through the website. So Andrew Weinberg, you're a member now, so you can message him in that way as well. Great. But thank you so much. That's very generous of you to share your project and passion. And I'm actually shocked at how many people are involved in healthcare in the room. It's really, really amazing. And I think we've got an opportunity to really make a difference in the healthcare realm. So So anyway, any last comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Jay, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes.
First of all, I want to say, great, glad you're doing this. You're kind of spearheading blockchain for Arizona. You're the reason Blockchain Startup Day was on the map through your representation. You spoke at the House of Representatives. Can you give us an update on what is going on with David Schweikert? Some of the things we heard were somebody was trying to make it so that any cryptocurrency did not have capital gains. I think that was in the last meeting, something like that. Some of the other issues you mentioned was the IRS views it as property. The FTC views it as a tradable currency. So if you can just give us an update on some of that.
Yeah, so David Schweikert introduced a proposal in the last tax bill that would have exempted $600 in cryptocurrency transactions from, I think, taxation, which would have been amazing. Didn't pass.
It died in committee.
It died in committee. There's Arizona proposal to allow you to pay your Arizona income tax in cryptocurrency. We have Jeff Winninger, who I think has sponsored like 6 bills related to cryptocurrency, fintech sandbox, taking the corporation commission operations, putting them on blockchain. Huge, huge champion. And he is basically working with Congressman Schweikert, so they kind of collaborate. We could spend another session, hour and a half, on all that stuff. Suffice it to say, we have a very, very rare opportunity in Arizona. We have policymakers that are willing to collaborate with us, that are willing to come to events like this and talk before and afterwards and see what works. Because what worked in the past in the regulatory realm is not necessarily going to work in the future. And I assert that a big part of the innovation in the cryptocurrency, in the blockchain realm, is in the policy. For cryptocurrency to really scale, the consumer has to have some safeguards. Different than consumer protection where you're going to make them whole, it's safeguards, information, whatever. And I think that's part of the innovation set that we have here. So I think we're over time. We do, if you want to continue the conversation, you can go over to Canyon 49. They're open till 10. Our next session is going to be March 28th. I'm not announcing what that topic will be because I'm working on the underlying parts of that. But if you have topics that you'd like to cover in these sessions, let me know. And I want to thank everybody in the room again for participating. Even if you didn't say a word, you being here tonight is part of the building of the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Where's Canyon 49?
Right.
It's just next door.
Yeah.
So, but if you would go out the front door
In the hotel.
and walk over there.
Yeah.